Yo, what's up guys? Say Chronicles here, talking about gear. What's the best gear in the game? What should you get? What should you upgrade? What should you not upgrade? What should you aim for? Where to get it? How to get it? All of those topics I will talk about in this video. So we're going to look everything through professions because in the end, you're going to work towards those professions and you will get the gear from there. If you're early game, just use whatever the story gives you. You don't have to craft all of these. You just pretty much, these are just only useful for getting your blacksmith up. If you're not into the raids yet, because you will actually get all of your gear from the raids, the only gear that you will use will be the gear from the story. You could use some of the subjugation gear, but in most cases, it's just stuff you get from the story, from quest lines and whatnot. And that is more than enough. So at some point, you progress on through the raids, which are findable over here. First you go for Foggy, then you go for White Castle, then you go for Naraka, which you're probably all familiar with. Then the question might be, what is the best gear? Well, currently the best gear we can get is Naraka gear, and Naraka gear is 6-1 at top. 6-1 means 6 stars and then 1 awakening. I just call it 6-1, so this would be a 5-5, this would be a 6, and this would be a 6-1. So as we can see, we've progressed through, okay, Foggy gear, that could be 5-3 at max, White Castle gear, 5-5 at max, and then Naraka gear, 6-1 at max. As you can see, there's more than just those 5-3s, 5-5s, and 5-1s, or 6-1s, because you can also get 6-2s, and you can actually get everything to 6-2. Currently, we cannot do that yet. We can do that the moment we get extra materials. Those extra materials are materials that you get from Seal. So we would have to kill Seal to get those. And if I'm not mistaken, from the release of this video, about 1 week later, we will get Seal. So we can make even your Foggy gear go straight from 5-3 to 6. And even to 6-2 the moment we also get Marsh. And Marsh is the last raid that was added in NA. And I think we will get that in probably like 3-4 weeks. So the moment we get Seal, you can make your gear to 6 and all of your gear to 6. This still is the same. You cannot make it 6-2 yet because you actually need the Marsh gear right away for the 6-2. Very important factor to keep in mind with upgrading any gear is that if you go from 5-5 to 6, you will lose half of your plus things. So let's say you already made a plus 12, you make it from 5-5, you go to 6, you will go from plus 12 to plus 6. So you have to do the re-upgrades of the re-enhancements of those. Also, very important factor is, do you want to go from 6-1 to 6-2, or do you want to go from 6 to 6-1, for example, because your stats will reroll. It doesn't necessarily mean that you get better stats or different stats. Everything will be changed. So currently I have 3 Bs and 1 C. That could be like triple S or like triple D, like anything like that. Or like all of them are D or anything. So that kind of means that at some point, if you get something really good, so let's see if I have one that I would say is really, really good. Well, this one is pretty okay. Like if the evasion was, for example, attack or something, then this would be like pretty good. And you could say like, okay, if I go 6-2, it might be way worse. So let's assume this evasion was attack. I would say like, in that case, I don't want to risk it. I just keep it 6-1. It is good right now. I take it for the stats. I don't take it for the main stat. And I just keep it as is. But for some of them, like this, for example, is not that great. I have one that's an example that's even way worse. That is one that is a, yeah, like this one, for example, this one is a 6-1 with absolutely the worst stats. This is one of the first candidates to be 6-2. Also, I really don't recommend to use any of those refinement stones. Do not use them yet. The moment your gear is 6-2, then start thinking about refining. 6-1 gear, 9 out of 10 is not worth it to refine unless there's like triple like S rolls on it or something like that. And then you could go like, maybe, okay, this is like very, very end game gear and I will keep this gear like for a very long time. It's already the correct set, which I'll talk more about later, which sets do you actually want to use. But in most cases, I don't recommend to use those refinements yet. Because you could say, for example, like, oh, this is pretty good. Then I would like say like, okay, I'm going to refine those two because then like these two together would be nice and that kind of stuff. Yeah, no, I don't really recommend to do that, like not at all. So I just recommend you to not use them yet. Also, I won't be making a video on that topic yet until we actually are possibly getting 6-2. Also, I won't be making any video content on it for like how this exactly works, because there are some niche things to it, like how it works and what you should look out for, that you don't make any mistakes, because this material is pretty rare to come by. We will get more of it later at Galaros. So I will make a video around that time as well. But I don't want to make a video on it right now yet, because then people will actually start wasting that material, and I highly encourage you to not use that material yet. Use that material once your weapon is 6-2 or your equipments are 6-2, or you got like the perfect, or like the near perfect 6-1, and then you might consider it if you also want to keep that specific set. So technically, what is the best gear right now? Naraka. For everyone. Why? Because simply the base stats are so much higher. If we check the base stats for a 6-1, it's close to 1800. If we check the base stats for a 5-5, this one is 1630. Simply said, Naraka gear is the best gear right now. Everyone should take everything of Naraka, no matter what kind of set effect it gives, no matter what it gives. Naraka gear is by far the best gear right now. But that is what I also say right now, because the moment we get Seal gear, the moment we get Marsh gear, and the moment we can make things 6-2, that actually all changes. And Seal gear, the moment we get it on release, I think the highest you can make it is 6-1. No, actually you can make it all the way 6-2 right away. That's pretty interesting. So technically the moment Seal gear comes, you can make it to 6-2 already. And as you can see, 6-2 is a 1900 compared to a 6-1 that is 1800. That's a really big boost. And that of course also works for like all of the stats. Like for example, if we check the HP one, that is 21,000 and this one is 19,000. That's a good amount of upgrade. But what should you get then? Because the moment, probably you haven't really checked it yet, but every weapon and every sub-weapon and also every accessory has a different effect for every weapon. So if we go to this one, it shows like, okay, we have a random attribute skill by +2. Those are the things, if you go to your skills, the ones that are on the top right, the ones that you don't really focus on, and you get 2 in those. If we check that for White Castle gear gives 2 of the random skills. So that could be your skill 1, your skill 2, your skill 3 of your main character. If we go that for Naraka, we get an extra level on the ult. So that also means, let's say, if we go to the skill tree over here, I think, yep, if I show the Naraka weapon, you can see that this one is showed as a 7. Technically, it is not 7. Technically, it's 6, but for this weapon, it is a 7 because I have that one specific gear in there. If I go for the light weapon, if I'm not mistaken, does it immediately show our difference? I think it should show a difference. I'm not sure if that... Oh, the weapon is not 6, and on the 6, you probably don't have that yet. If I'm not mistaken, oh, it does have that, so it does show like one light. Probably if I equip this and I go to skill right now, and then yeah, it shows that I have this one. But you might also see I have one over here. And that is because of my sub-weapon. My sub-weapon also has something specific, which in this case is a 1 wind, which is also random, which one you get. So first let's get over which ones are there for the weapons, which ones are best for which classes, and then switch on to the sub-weapons and then the accessories, because that actually determines, it doesn't have to mean that Naraka is your best weapon. Especially because Naraka gives like your ulti, at some point you're going to be max skilled, even your ulti is max skilled, and you don't really need that +1 from your Naraka weapon. Where does it come interesting is if we check, for example, this one, it increases the attack of your monsters. And on the highest level, if I'm not mistaken, this is going to be 85. So all of your units that you're currently walking around with get 85 extra attack. That is very useful too, whereas this is just 1 skill up. This is just 2 skill ups, but random. And this one is also 2 skill ups, but even in more skill. So technically speaking, this weapon is probably the best weapon for pretty much everyone the moment you're max skilled. Until you're max skilled, probably it's actually, I would say that probably the weapon from this, which is the White Castle weapon. White Castle weapon might actually be one of the more interesting, because 2 random skills, you could actually build around that you don't level the 2 other skills. The only issue is you have 5 different weapons. What if all different weapons get a skill up in a different skill? You still have to kind of level all of them, right? But then again, also, this gear, this weapon is probably the hardest to get from all of them, because you have to beat Seal. And You get a lot of these materials, but none of, like, they don't always drop. Plus, you're capped of how many times you can go into Seal right away. Seal is not the easiest of dungeons. It's pretty much also the longest dungeon to run. I will also, of course, be making a video on Seal, how it works, what you get, where to go for, what kind of team setups, because it's pretty different than other raids so far. But yeah, you can't just simply say, like, okay, I'm gonna go everything for Seal. If you are lucky enough to get the different weapons, I would definitely start crafting up the weapons from Seal, because they are pretty good. And if we check from Marsh, Marsh has a level up, I think even 2 levels up on the basic attack. Not that useful as well. So for weapons, to be honest, for every 3 classes, the best is going to be Seal weapons. Especially for, well, actually just no, simply every class, I would say best weapon is Seal weapon. Will you probably get those for all of your weapons? Probably not. So just work with whatever you have that you say, like, okay, I upgrade this. Is it good stats? But I also recommend all of these higher upgrades cost Seal material. So this is Seal material, the other one is Seal material, this is Seal material. So that means if you upgrade other weapons to 6-2 or even 6 in those 2 cases, you cannot use that material for upgrading a Seal weapon. So be very careful with upgrading those things and check what you want to upgrade. And maybe you actually want to wait until you get that Seal weapon so you can upgrade it that way. Let's look at sub-weapons. So sub-weapons, we have the same process. We have like the 5-3s, the 5-5s, the 6-1s, and then Seal can go straight into 6-2. What is interesting for Seal? Or let's just start at the top. What do we get from this one? We have damage or decrease the summoner damage taken. If I'm not mistaken, this goes down to 5%, which makes it very interesting for mainly Orbias. This will definitely be my sub-weapon of choice. Will be the foggy sub-weapon, which may sound weird. Like, hey, that's the first dungeon. Say, like, that doesn't sound like any good. Why would you take a sub-weapon from the first dungeon? Because it can get the exact same stats on 6-2. It doesn't get any worse stats. Just have to use these Seal materials to make them to 6 and then 6-2. But 5% damage reduction on my summoner on Orbiaf to die less, that's very useful. So that's definitely something I will go for. Summoner's attribute damage taken, so that is from 1 element. So you could say, like, okay, I take less damage from fire. I don't know the exact number of it, but I say that's pretty trash. Yeah, I would say the foggy sub-weapon is just pretty trash because you don't know what element you're hitting all the time or is hitting you actually. So that one is pretty bad. I don't really like the foggy sub-weapon. Then we have this one, which is the increased random attribute research 1 to 2. So in this case, mine currently has a wind +1. I use wind most of the time, so that's kind of useful. But it can be a 1 or a 2. So also not that useful, especially if you're max skills, not that useful. Then we have the one on Seal. And Seal adds extra monster HP. I'm not entirely sure how much it is. I will put it over there because I can search it up later. But monster HP total up, I would say pretty decently useful, but I would still say even for Cleave and for Hina, this one, damage reduction is pretty nice. Like, it makes you survive longer. Then we have this one, and that is increased damage, monster damage dealt in arena and battlefields. This one is also pretty interesting. I would say it's, well, interesting for all 3 actually. For Orbia, maybe slightly less because you really want to take that damage reduction, but for Cleave and for Kina, that maybe care slightly less about getting damage because I can just survive and that kind of stuff. Making your units do extra damage, and once again, I'll leave the number up there, how much the final is. That might be very interesting. So I would say Cleave and Kina, go for this one. Orbias, probably want to go for that one. Of course, you can say, like, okay, I don't really want to do exactly what he says, but these are kind of my guidelines which I recommend of gear for you to take. Then we go to accessories. For accessories, I don't have to check all of them because they're set effects. So if we check one, we check pretty much for all of them. So the first one we have, if we have the foggy set effect, we have summoner defense by 250. Pretty interesting. Then we have this one, which is summoner HP by 3.4k. Okay, not too bad. Then we have the Naraka, which is the currently one, is the summoner attack by 185. Okay. Then we have the Seal one. Seal one is monster defense by 140. Okay, that's already more interesting because would you rather add stats to 1 character, your main character, or to 3 characters that walk around you? 3 characters around you with 140 is quite a nice addition. And then we have the last one, which is interesting for just PvP, which is decrease monsters damage taken by 11%. That is a lot. That's really, really a lot. So the simple answer is, if you care about PvP, this is your one to go. Any of the 3 classes, this is definitely your one to. But will you get a full Marsh set that fast? I'm not entirely sure. There's also quite a bunch of people that say like, okay, I actually get 2 sets. So I get a damage set on Naraka, so I also have my Summoner more damage. Mainly Orbias do that as well, but I've seen some Cleaves and that kind of stuff also do that. So you have 2 sets. One is like an Orbia damage set, and one will be a, or just not an Orbia, but just an overall damage set. And this one will be for your PvP set, and the other one is the PvE set. That's maybe what you want to focus to, like towards more endgame. But for me personally, I will stay with a Naraka set. I will go for 6-2 for the ones that are 6-1, not that great right now. And by that, at some point, I will transition into this one, which will take me quite a while. Maybe I'll stay like a bunch of the things that I currently have on 6-1s, and then transition this into like 6-2s right away. I'm not entirely sure how I will fit that in, but those are kind of the plans that I have so far. Would you say like, okay, go for seal accessories? It is nice, but as I said, seal is harder to come by, and also get all of these seal materials is pretty hard. So I really recommend to go for seal weapons rather than seal accessories. And for, of course, Cleave and Kina, you could also decide like, okay, I'm just gonna go for like Summoner defense, or I go for Summoner HP. So that's kind of up to you. These 2 are pretty good for both. Well, actually for all 3 characters. It's not bad for Orbia to be slightly more tanky as well. But if you care about PvE, I would say Naraka's best. PvP, Marsh is by far best. So those are my recommendations for all of your weapons. Of course, it's your choice, and also depending on what kind of rolls you get, on what kind of weapons or equipment, which really depend like, okay, is something worth it or not? So I hope you learned a thing or two. Enjoy this video, and see you in the next one.